I used to close my eyes and imagine what retirement would look like. I asked myself what kind of stories I'd have to share. As a police sergeant, I figured I'd have plenty of tales to occupy the grandkids while supper was being prepared one room over. I knew I'd have stories of justice. I knew I'd have stories of injustice too. I hoped that my experiences would paint a picture of the world that would prepare my kids for both the beautiful and the dangerous parts of life. I didn't expect to have a story so strange. I didn't expect to have a story that I couldn't tell, not to my grandkids and not to anybody else. Until now, I guess. Secrets get heavier with time. No one tells you that when you promise to keep quiet. I can't carry the weight anymore. Maybe by sharing the story of that night, I can finally feel like I've kept my vow to protect and serve. The thing I saw, the world needs to be protected from. It was a June night. I remember because my mother's birthday was coming up. I was trying to decide what to buy her when dispatch connected me to one of our rookie officers. The kid was babbling, some nonsense about an accident. He needed a supervisor, which is where I came in. He gave me the address, and I forgot all about Mom's birthday. The neighborhood the rookie was in isn't exactly friendly towards cops. I assumed he'd gotten into an altercation with a civilian. I hoped things hadn't gotten too far out of hand. I parked behind the other police vehicle and surveyed the building first. An old 2-story home, historical type. It and every other house on the block had been neglected for at least a decade. Peeling paint, crooked sinking porch, and a few painted-out windows. I recognized the rookie on the porch immediately. He was sitting on the stairs, hyperventilating. It took me a few minutes to get him to explain. He repeated what dispatch had told me. He'd been sent out to investigate a domestic disturbance. I was already assembling the ugliest pictures in my mind. For the kid to be shaken up so badly, I expected it to be graphic. When he said the family wasn't home, my brow folded up like a newspaper. The rookie had fired his weapon inside, he said. Instead of standing outside and guessing what the kid had walked into, I walked through the open front door and announced my presence. No answer. That's what I expected. What I didn't expect was the stench. A window at the end of the hall was open. Even the cool night breeze couldn't cleanse the house of the stench of death. I knew at the back of the hall was a bedroom, and inside of it was the scene of the crime. I held my breath and kept going. The mattress was shredded. Stuffing and springs were everywhere. It looked like a bomb had gone off. A dresser was turned on its side and a mirror was shattered. There were deep grooves on the floor that looked like scratch marks. Fingernails, I wondered. Then I walked around the bed. I found the thing that the rookie had shot. It looked like a dog, a big, sick dog. I covered my mouth, convinced that what I was looking at was an animal with some disease. I didn't want to catch it. The fur was missing. The skin was red and swollen, patchy. It almost looked like it was covered in scales. The snout was pronounced, and its canines drooped over its bottom lip. Its eyes were set far back, deep in the sockets like a skull. And the spine was pronounced, jutting out of the animal's back in unfamiliar angles. I knew it was unnatural. It shook me just like it shook the rookie. I turned and ran out of the room. I remember catching my breath on the porch and telling the kid that he'd done a good job subduing that thing. We didn't need it running loose in the city. Before he could respond, the captain arrived on the scene with emergency personnel. I didn't recognize any of the EMTs or the firefighters. It was strange because I knew so many of them at the time. None of them looked me in the eye either. They didn't check on the rookie or myself. The captain pulled us aside and took our report. He insisted convincingly that the kid had found a dog with a one-of-a-kind affliction. We wanted to believe him that night. When the firefighters dragged the carcass out, wrapped in the tattered sheets of the bed, I knew something was amiss. They loaded it into the back of the ambulance, and the medical technicians drove it away. That wasn't standard procedure. They weren't animal control. We took the rest of the night off and tried to collect our thoughts. I bought my mom a new coffee grinder. A few days later, the rookie was fired. It was weird, I knew that, but I had so many other responsibilities that it was easy to forget about the scaled thing in that bedroom. The kid bumped into me a few weeks later outside of a grocery store. He didn't look good. It looked like he was having nightmares. When I asked him if everything was all right, he gave me a firm no. Then he admitted to the truth he wanted to share that night on the porch. He wasn't shaken up because he'd killed the creature. He was shaken up because the second one escaped out the hallway window. So much for one of a kind, huh? The rookie and I were never close. We drifted even further apart after that. What was I supposed to do, knowing that there were more of those animals out there? Who was I supposed to tell when the sightings kept coming in? The captain knew back then, I'm sure. Whoever was dressed as those EMTs and firefighters, they knew too. They knew, and they made sure that the truth didn't get out. Now, I guess it is. Those things that go bump in the night, they're real. They are out here, and they need to be driven out. Things that happen at night don't always stay in the dark. I had just got home from a crazy night at work. I was so tired. It was one of those my tired is tired kind of nights. I had driven home in a daze and honestly don't remember much about the drive home. What I do remember is the soft, low growls I heard as I got out of my car. I lived out by the lake in what's commonly known as Indian Land, and weird things happened all the time. But when I heard that growl, it made my blood run cold. I couldn't see anything in the dark. It was a new moon, so I didn't even have the moonlight to help me. I couldn't see anything, but I knew that something wasn't right. I could just feel it, and so my instincts told me to run. I bolted into the garage, watching over my shoulder and panicking the whole time. I felt like you do when you're a little tired and you watch a scary movie. As I slammed the door behind me, the growl was louder. It sounded like it was just outside of my line of sight. My friends were sitting on the couch when I flew into the house, clearly freaked out. They all jumped up. I worked a dangerous job and they were afraid that someone had followed me home. It wouldn't be the first or last time that someone tried. I assured them that no one was following me, but that they absolutely could not go outside because something was out there. They laughed. Of course they did. I sounded crazy even to myself. No sooner did I say, "We can't, there was something out there," and then something hit the window. We had some of the curtains shut, and my ex went and peeked it out, immediately jumping back towards us. Whatever I couldn't see before was obviously visible now. I screamed like a little girl when we heard scratching at the back door. I'd never been so terrified. I still didn't understand what it was, but I knew it couldn't be good. I was looking from window to window, trying to see any movement outside or anything to explain what was happening. As I looked at the big window next to the fireplace, I locked eyes with a creature. It growled low in its throat, and I could feel the vibrations in the air. My hair stood on end, and I couldn't pull my eyes away from the glowing red eyes staring back at me. I backed up against the wall, shaking as this thing stared at me. I was able to slowly start making out features against the dark. It was just black emptiness surrounding the red eyes. But that emptiness was slowly starting to take form. I watched as this thing with antlers watched me. My breath was coming fast and panicked. I closed my eyes, willing this all to be a bad dream. But the growling started again. My friends were completely silent. No one knew what was happening. No one knew what to say. We had never seen anything like it, and they had no idea what to do. I realized that we were inside, and this creature was mad. It wanted us, but more specifically, it wanted me. It watched me with an intensity that I hadn't known until that night, and haven't experienced since. But I was inside, which meant I had to be safe, right? I watched until the eyes disappeared and ran to turn the porch lights on, and we tried to quickly cover the windows that didn't have curtains. I had no idea where it had gone or how long we had until it reappeared, but I wanted as much cover to block it out as possible. Out of sight, out of mind. We were almost done when something hit the side of the house. It sounded like a truck had just plowed into the wall I was standing next to as I hurried to hang up blankets on nails that were already in the walls. I jumped back, screaming as I hurried to the center of the room. My friends quickly ran back to the middle of the living room with me. They were just as scared, but trying not to show it. Someone had to stay brave, and we were all failing epically. It was then that the scent hit us. I immediately gagged as the smell of rotten flesh filled the room. I had thought that the light would scare it away, but instead, it walked right into the light and turned to look at us through the back door. I screamed. I've never seen anything like this before. The face wasn't a face. Instead, it was a skull with antlers and red eyes, and the body was just rotting flesh. The stench was making me gag. I couldn't handle it. I backed away, trying to break the eye contact this thing demanded. One of my friends ripped the last blanket off the couch and ran to cover the window on the door, yelling to me to get out of the room. I don't know how we knew it wanted me, but we knew. I was quickly rushed into my room with the curtains drawn and only a nightlight on. I crawled into my bed, pulling the blankets up over my head and praying that this night would end soon. One of my friends stayed in my room with me and turned the TV on in an attempt to drown out the growls and snarls coming from outside. I don't know how long I stayed curled up in my room before it was suddenly silent. There were no more growls, no more slamming into the outside of the house. It was just silent. After a while, I was able to fall asleep, but I never went anywhere after dark alone again. I'm a big hiker, and I used to do a lot of hiking alone. I don't as much anymore, especially after the encounter I had. It actually changed my behavior a lot. I'm much more careful now, and I actually carry a gun now. Guns are kind of a disputed thing in the hiking community. Some people say that if you're smart and follow the guidelines, you'll never need one. Others say it doesn't hurt, and others say you should always have one, because bears and mountain lions don't care about the guidelines. I've always carried bear spray as a precaution, but a gun is a whole different level. You see, that's the thing about life. You could live your whole life thinking and believing one thing, like, I don't need a gun while hiking. And then something crazy happens and your whole perspective changes. Now my perspective is, I need a gun anytime I go into the woods. I suppose that my perspective on life has changed in more ways than just that as a result of this encounter. I went my whole life thinking, there's nothing weird in the woods. And now I believe there's definitely something weird in the woods. I live in Northern California. When people think of California, they think of surfing and the Pacific Oceans and liberal politics. Where I come from, we don't fit that stereotype. There are no surfer dudes giving you a hang loose and voting blue. Northern California is very mountainous and fairly remote. People here are old-fashioned, and we like the traditional way of living. Now, I'm fairly young, so I have some issues with the traditional way of living. but I think there's some legitimate wisdom in a lot of it. It was my grandpa that first brought me out into the woods and made me fall in love with it. Now that I think about it, he always carried a gun. Because things are so traditional out here, there are a lot of stories. People haven't forgotten about that footage that was on the news in the 70s. The town I live in, Grayling, is pretty far from where that footage was shot, but people talk about it nonetheless, like it happened right in their backyard. I always thought they were just stories that people told for fun, just stories for hanging out around the fire or in the woods, just stories to teach little kids to be careful in the woods and at night. My encounter began like any other hiking trip. It had been a long work week, so I just wanted to get out into the woods and unwind a little. Lose cell service to gain perspective, as those dumb tourist t-shirts say. My plan was to drive a few hours out to a nearby canyon, hike out a few miles, and then pitch a tent. I was by myself and planned to just spend some time alone, thinking and relaxing. The canyon is called Big Pine Canyon because it's relatively wide and has a flat forested floor. It's a great camping spot, but not well known. The locals have managed to keep it a secret, so there are basically no tourists that know about it. I parked the truck and hiked out. It was relatively uneventful. I took my time enjoying the remoteness of the valley. I didn't see a single other person, and there were no other cars in the trailhead lot. I pitched my camp, made a fire, and went to bed. It was peaceful and uneventful. Until the next day, which had enough eventfulness for a lifetime. From the second I woke up, things were anything but peaceful. That's because I woke up to a knocking sound, like someone was hitting a tree trunk with a big stick. Normally I'd write this off as random forest noise. Weird things happen in the woods, and they come with weird noises. Some degree of weird noises is normal, but this knocking was consistent, happening every few minutes. It was also rhythmic, making it seem very, very intentional. It wasn't just a branch breaking, and it was too loud to be a woodpecker. The knocking alone was honestly quite eerie. It would last for a few seconds and then stop. And then it would pick up again a few minutes later and stop. I started to pack up my tent and sleeping bag. I didn't know what was out there, but I knew I didn't think I wanted to encounter it. I was on the trail back, and the knocking didn't stop. It actually seemed like it was following me. I was hiking as fast as I could, basically running, and something was in pursuit of me, making sure that I knew it was following me, because it kept on knocking. I kept checking the trail behind me, trying to see what was making the sound. Toward the end of the trail, you come out of the woods and into a wide plain full of native grasses. From this point, it's only about a mile to the trailhead. I broke through the tree line and was in this grassy, flat area when I finally caught a glimpse of it. I was checking over my shoulder again when I saw a big shadow just inside the tree line. It was huge, probably 9 feet tall. It was the shape of a man standing on 2 legs, but it was far too big to be a man. It had a long, thick branch in its right hand. I watched as it held it above its head and started banging against the tree branches above its head. When it started knocking, I started sprinting for the car. Up until this point, I had just been hiking fast. Now I was running in my heavy hiking boots, trying not to trip on the uneven dirt trail. I didn't check over my shoulder as I ran, but I could hear it knocking, warning me to get out of its valley. I've not gone back to Big Pine Canyon since then. Something else lives there, and obviously, I was trespassing. It gave me a warning to get out. I'm not going to test its patience.